Let's move on to Sunday then, James. Claret and Blue versus Claret and Blue, although Villa played in white 1-1 in the end.
Watch the game?
West Ham and Villa. I did.
Off you go then.
I did. Obviously, with Villa losing John McGinn, they brought on a debutant in Morgan Rogers. I don't think he's played a Premier League game for them.
He certainly played. I don't know if he started. Not
I don't
sure.
think it's his first start.
And it was John Duran's first start this season as well.
And it very much, I was interested to see how they would line up. It was very much like a 4-4-2 in that Duran was right up top alongside Ollie Watkins. And Rodgers did okay. You know, I mean, he's still finding his feet. He's a young kid, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of similarities in like Ramsey and what have you. And you can see that there's a talent there. He definitely didn't shirk any challenges. And it's a man's game. He equipped himself really well. But you could tell that they just missed that little bit of experience in the middle of the field with Tielemans and Luiz. Like, they needed one more in there to kind of give them any sort of control, because Longley and Torres, being two left-footed centre-backs coming in, couldn't control the distribution. Like, it was too easy to force them down blind alleys and make them make mistakes in the first half for West Ham. And we did well from that kind of point of view. Villa didn't particularly offer too much attacking threat, really. They're obviously a good team with good players. West Ham, on the other hand, like I thought it would, the new front four of Bowen back to the right, Kudus over to the left, Paqueta in as a number 10 and Antonio up top, stuck. From following on from the Freiburg game as well, where obviously we were very attacking and did particularly well to steamroll them, really. Is really interesting now. I think that's going to stick for a while, which means Ward-Prowse out of the team and Calvin Phillips obviously.
Must credit you, mate, because you said that on one of our pieces last week. You said you thought Antonio would be back in the team and Ward-Prowse would now miss out, and he was right.
I don't see it. I see Alvarez. So Ward-Prowse, Phillips, and Souček are fighting for that other midfield slot alongside Alvarez, because the rest of the team is playing too well like that. And I think the interesting thing is, particularly with Freiburg, in the first half, Alvarez and Paqueta were the two that were highest leading the press quite often. Or Paqueta would go forward and be the one pressuring the centre-backs. But then Alvarez is almost playing in a number 10 position as ready to cut off the balls into. Yeah, off the ball, 100%.
We could certainly see a high press yesterday as well.
Positionally, it's like they go right high. And so you're almost like Alvarez, my holding midfield, but in the opposition half, cutting out the passing lines. And it worked really well.
So we see so much more man-to-man orientated press from teams now. So much more.
Completely. And then Antonio kind of drifts out to the left or the right more than actually being the one that leads the press, because Paqueta's the one that actually is the one that leads the press. And it worked really well for West Ham. I think both those two games, we've seen that if we try and have a bit more impetus and attacking play, there's goals in that team. And look, 2 disallowed. We had the ball in the back of the net 4 times. Obviously, 3 of them disallowed. I'm not sure what the first Kudus one was. VAR will get all the talking headlines.
Foul in the build-up, wasn't it? I've not seen that one.
They were all just... And the last one was the most frustrating, where it was like, if you can't figure this out for 6 minutes, then you can't figure this out. Although I do think Souček was a arm ball.
I think it's the right decision, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I tell you why.
I don't think Antonio's was though.
I tell you why. I think with the Souček one, I think it's kind of unintentional, and obviously by law, technically, if it doesn't directly lead to, i.e. Souček scores himself, technically it should stand. So what they'll have looked at with that is, does it have a high influence on Wham's next, i.e. is it accidental? Probably yes. But Souček steams in to try and obviously score, and there is one angle of it where you can see his arm comes forward like that. I don't think he even means to do it. I think it's natural. But that ultimately decides the fact that the ball goes in the net.
Yeah, I think I've got no issues with the Souček one other than how long it takes, man. And it ruins it, where I was watching it on the telly and the kids were doing something on their computers, and then goal. So I went over to look at the kids that wanted some help with something, and like 5 minutes later, my wife's sitting over there and she's like, goal's been disallowed. I'm like, it was inevitable at the point that the guy went to the monitor.
I was at my dad's. We was watching Man United against Liverpool, and I had SofaScore sitting like on my lap, and I was like, it's come up West Ham has scored, but there isn't a confirmation on anything yet. And
the score.
Eventually, it was like 2 minutes later, it was like the scorer's up. Then 2 minutes later, the assist was up, and he was like, so is it confirmed? And I'm like, I don't think it is. Something's going on here. Yeah. So
it took forever in the end, and frustrating. I think look, Villa now have conceded 4 against you, and they didn't look great at the back at all, to be honest with you. So whilst we've tried to do you a couple of favours in the last week by beating Freiburg and then now taking some points off Villa, mate, you didn't do your own job, but...
No. Listen, well done to you for the last week.
But Villa, they're not looking right at the back. There's just something not quite right there. Just
one point on you obviously winning on Thursday does mean it's about a 70% probability now that fifth place will get Champions League place.
Until we lose to Leverkusen.
To be honest, no, I don't think that, because I think the projections will have Leverkusen beating you anyway.
Yeah.
So if you beat Leverkusen, that's it. It's done, basically. But I think the projections in the percentages will be that Leverkusen beats you, so I don't think that has a huge bearing. Whereas obviously, because you were behind to Freiburg, it was kind of like a 50-50 and a bit of a sway. But one of the things I discussed with Clayton on our Patreon podcast on Friday after you won was, I said I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with a narrative here where it's going to be, does anyone want to qualify for the Champions League? Do you remember, I think it was the 18-19 season.
You and Arsenal.
And Chelsea and Manchester United as well.
No one wanted
and it was like, the results in the running were so bad. I think Arsenal and Tottenham were roughly tracking at about a point per game over the last 8.
Yeah.
They ended up finishing 4th, 5th. Chelsea finished 3rd. And you might remember United had a terrible as well. They got smashed like 4-0 at Everton. Had some other bad results after they'd had a really good sort of January to March. And one of the things I said to Clayton on Friday was that just psychologically, just knowing that 5th might be enough, we'll have a different psyche. If you look at the biggest disappointment from Tottenham's performance at Fulham was, it was the first time I looked at them this year and I think, you're lacking something physically. I mean, look at Udogie on Johnson on the second goal, for example. Like, it's disgusting. You haven't seen that sort of thing from my team this year, where it's just become like really easy and passive off the ball. And I just wondered, last Sunday was like, you can't lose at Villa. There's real pressure on it. You can't lose. Whereas this week, you flipped it and you're now favourites with the bookies to finish 4th, and 5th might be enough anyway. It's psychological.
It does, 100%
It's
has
psychological. And I wouldn't be surprised if with that narrative playing out now, that Tottenham and Villa's results suffer a little bit. It might even be that Manchester United's do as well, because rather than thinking, well, if it's 4th, we've got to put our foot down and win every game, they'll be going, oh, Villa and Tottenham ain't that consistent anyway. So, we can afford to lose that one, but if we win that one, we might catch it.
And obviously, they've gone through to the semis now of the FA Cup. So
yes.
that's another opportunity to win a trophy. Like, we could see another all-Manchester final, potentially.
Villa and Tottenham, the difference between this year and the 18-19 season is Villa and Tottenham have horrendous run-ins anyway, in terms of fixtures.
The fixtures are awful
But don't be surprised if there's some sloppy results even amongst the good fixtures, because the psyche is, well, it doesn't matter so much. And Ange coming out and going, don't matter where we finish anyway. Yeah, it does, by the way, mate. But, mate, you see that. It could be that it's, 5th will probably be enough. Honestly, it does have a psyche on the two teams.
I can imagine. So, not a great day for Villa. I think, obviously, both teams having big wins on Thursday night. How were they going to respond on a Sunday? But I think from a West Ham point of view, like if you own the likes of Bowen or you've gambled on Kudus or whatever, they could have all returned at the weekend, and will continue to do so. And I do like the new setup with Antonio back up top, Bowen on the right, Kudus on the left, Paqueta pulling the strings in the middle, and then Alvarez or Souček pushing up as well.
Do you think that sticks for the next two, Newcastle away and Tottenham at home?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Moyes didn't like to mix it up. I think the only weird thing was when he took Antonio off, which was around 70 minutes or something like that.
He's just come back, isn't he? And he said afterwards, a little bit fatigued.
He put Ben Johnson on. You've got the opportunity to go like for like with bringing Danny Ings on, who's been okay in different games. He brings Ben Johnson onto the right, Bowen back up the middle. I don't know why he didn't play. He
explained it away, and he said there was a period at the game where Villa were dominating at that point when he made the change.
As in we sat in
and he wanted to find different avenues of trying to get out, rather than just going with something the same. That's what he said. So you were also winning, right? So at that point, if you do go a little bit more defensive and stop.
Who did Villa draw in the Conference League then?
Lille.
Okay.
Which is challenging. Yeah, Lille probably would have gone into the draw as third favourites behind Villa and Fiorentina. So, yeah, challenging one. And interesting for Villa as well. Second leg away in the quarterfinals. And if they hit the semis, it'll probably be Fenerbahce, also second leg away. So they're not a gimme to win that competition at all. I think the most likely of the English teams now to get to a final is Liverpool.
Well, I mean, that was obviously the case anyway, based on what
Liverpool had a good draw in Europa. It's a challenging one for yourselves. Obviously, for those who don't know, City and Arsenal, tough draws, Madrid and Bayern respectively, and then we'll play each other in the semis if they both win as well. So in the Champions League, you got the top four in the betting have landed on one side of the draw, very similar to what happened at the quarter-final stage with the draw last year as well.
Yeah, it just goes that, I mean, the standard in Europe is high. I suppose it's almost, that's why when West Ham drew Leverkusen, for example, I'm like, well, almost like, you have to take this seriously. You can't, if it was a Marseille or something like that, we might think, well, we're expected to win that game, maybe even a Roma, but we're not against Leverkusen, so it means you got to turn up or you don't. And we do have the second leg at home, as opposed to Aston Villa, who have their second leg away. Those ties at 11th and 18th. I really wanted Benfica because I'm actually in Portugal for the 11th and the 18th. And the 18th, I'm going to be in Lisbon, where I've got a couple of good friends that are Benfica fans. It's like, it would be nice to watch us beat Benfica in Lisbon while I'm there. But unfortunately, we drew the Germans, but so be it.
Sorry, mate. On Villa...
Yeah.
Since the two brilliant results in December where they beat Manchester City and Arsenal back-to-back 1-0.
At Villa Park.
At Villa Park, yes. But they've also, since then, they've had some difficult results at Villa Park. My team won there well. Newcastle won there well. And Chelsea won there well in the FA Cup as well. In the 12 games since, only one clean sheet. And that was the big win at Sheffield United when they won 5-0. And I think they've been hampered by, obviously, changing quite a lot defensively, and also the injuries, obviously, to be fair as well. Injuries to Pau Torres hasn't helped. Ezri Konsa missed a little bit of a period. In this particular game, he's played Konsa at right back, Longley as right-sided centre-back, which looks like it's built up into a back three in possession, and dropping Bailey to wing back and pushing Moreno up on the left-hand side. That didn't work so much. They were clearly better when Diaby came on. But for those with defensive assets, and there'll be plenty that do, I don't think there's much big expectation. Of the next 5, there's 3 good home games. Wolves, Brentford and Bournemouth. And I suspect they'll probably be definitive to where Villa finish, actually. Take 9 points from those 3 home games. I think they'll probably take 4th from here. But it's not a huge trust in them to do so at the moment, with others like, obviously, Ramsey missing, McGinn suspended, Kamara. I think the tougher the games get, the more the absence of Kamara will show as well. The big talking point from the weekend was Ollie Watkins did make it, but like everybody else in this blank game week, it just didn't really matter.
Nah, it didn't indeed. Good.